Thank you so much for joining me. It is another one of our lessons on the mobile interface for Sage CRM. Today we're going to be looking at escalation rules and table level scripts and how they can be used within the context of customizing the Sage CRM mobile theme. This might seem a little strange, and in fact what we'll actually do is look at some business rules in general to understand some of the important concepts, and I'll be referring you off to really some other learnings that you can follow, some other training material, and some of the thoughts that you can apply to this to be able to answer some of the fundamental questions that we would need to address as we're working with the mobile interface, to be able to start to think about, like, do I know where my people are? Do I know, can I tell when a piece of work has been entered through actually the mobile interface, or can I actually not tell whether something has been updated through the mobile interface? It's a question that you might find that is important for some bits of work. Now, what I am going to cover is obviously this idea of automation using the different tools that are availability and how that interacts with a mobile device. That's the theme of today's lesson within the context of this. So I will be touching on escalation rules, I will be touching on table level scripts, but I will actually be touching on quite a lot of other things because they set the groundworks for what we may want to do. So this topic is designed for a system administrator, and we're going to be looking at how we define and work with all of these different server-side tools to help us make sure that workflow elements are consistent between the desktop environment and the mobile environment. It's all about making sure that ultimately there's no inconsistency in the data and everything is the same quality, so you can be assured of that. So that's the idea of this. And there is a lot to cover in today's training, and I have to make some assumptions about what you already know about Sage CRM. So I'm going to be thinking about server-side behavior, which is defined by table level scripts, validation scripts. I'm going to be thinking about the way in which we can create simple notifications and escalation rules. If you want to know more about those in detail, there are courses available. There is a course available for development up on the Sage Support and Training YouTube channel. You just need to Google for that, or go to YouTube and search for Sage Support and Training, and then within that you'll find the different courses. And there's a new course there for developers that is all up to date with all of the current features for Sage CRM, and you can go through and understand how these areas work conceptually. Now, we are customizing a mobile interface for our particular business, whatever that is, whatever our business needs are. Now, when we customize the mobile interface, we are implementing business rules. And there are some broad generalizations that we can make about how to categorize different types of business rules. Now, in the lessons that I present, I categorize business rules into 4 general types. Now, there are far more than 4 types of business rules. You can be very precise about what they're doing, but basically the 4 main categories that I want to consider are the ones that we need to work with generally and most frequently when working with Sage CRM. Now, these rules are either restrictive, So a restrictive rule is one that will stop you carrying out a particular action. It will take you down and only allow you to choose data that is within tolerance. And it is very often informative. So it will tell you why um, you're not allowed to do something. So if you see an error message that tells you you need to do such and such, then that's a restrictive rule. But equally, if you find yourself, you can't see a field that you're not allowed to see, that's a restrictive rule. If you can't change some data, or you can only choose between two allowed values, then that's another type of restrictive behavior. Then we also have corrective rules, and corrective rules are really all about, well, bringing data back within tolerance. So if you find that you put a date, you say it's the 31st of February, well, you might just generate an error saying that's an illegal date because there are only 28 or 29 on leap years of February, but you may find that what will happen is that it will correct it to a reasonable assumption. Or if you find that you are typing in certain fields, they will automatically be capitalized. So you might find that a correction takes place when you type in the name of a city and it's capitalized because that's the standard and convention that the business uses. This is an example of a corrective rule. It allows the user to just quickly work and it will be brought into tolerance automatically. So these are all types of rules that are allowed, and sometimes mostly corrective rules are silent. They will just do their job, but sometimes they will tell the user that they've done this to draw attention. So it might be that if you put an upper limit on something and somebody puts in a higher amount, it corrects it to the highest permissible value, but explains to the user that that's what's happened so that they can see the message on the screen. And you have then the last type. So if we've met so far in my ramble, in my conversation now, that we've met the idea of a restrictive rule, a corrective rule, and an informative rule. Informative is the message that takes place. The manipulative rule is one that will very often cascade a change throughout the system. So if you reassign a company and their data, so a different user is then working as the account manager for that company, then you could have a rule that will automatically cascade a change throughout the system, which means that all of the opportunities that are still open are reassigned to that user. So here you can see that there are different types of rules, and we need to make sure that those rules are properly reflected within what we're doing inside the mobile interface as well, because we want to make sure that as work is carried out within the mobile interface, it's not putting in a different quality or standard of data to the main user interface. Now consider this screen. This is one that we saw in fact yesterday when we were working with the creation of projects. So here we can see that we are entering in a new record screen for a custom entity project. Now, when we actually started in the first lesson within this series, we looked at how a user working within the mobile interface has to obey the rules set by the security policies. Those are mostly restrictive in nature because they are all about governing the ability of a user to view, insert, update, or delete a record. And we also know, and we also saw in that first lesson as well, that depending on rights, a user may not even be able to see an individual field. So security policies and those rules, as field security rules, are essentially restrictive rules. They control access to both rows and fields within a table. We can see that fields can also be made required and ensure that the data entered by the user is within tolerance. So actually a lot of that is done by making sure that we use particular field types that ensure referential integrity and ensure only certain values are populated inside the drop-down lists. So this is a diagram that you may have seen before. So if you've attended any of those developer level training courses that I've run, this is a diagram that I use to try and explain that within Sage CRM, we have different scripting options that have different triggers, and they also have different abilities to reference and change data, and they're executed in different ways. We are going to see in a moment a create script. We're going to see that this is a field level script defined against an individual field within a screen. Create scripts are executed on the server as the screen is assembled. In the case of our mobile theme, it's assembled to generate the XML that will then be processed to create the interface that we're interested in. And you can have different scripts for the screen used in the mobile device than you can within the main desktop. So we know that we have different versions of a screen, whether it is the Oppo detail box, then you'll have one that is for the mobile device and one that is for the desktop. Same name, but you've got different fields and different definitions of scripts associated with them. Now, within the screen definitions, you can have on change scripts on a field, and these are scripts that are sent to the browser and are executed on the on change event of the field as the data in the field is altered. Now, the script can access and change data within the document object model, so that's anything within the web page. But we're not really going to be looking too much. I don't think we'll be looking at that in this particular lesson because it's something that is very similar to any of the on-change scripting that you might want to use. I may touch on it in the next lesson. Validation scripts are, however, linked to fields as well, and they're triggered when the data is submitted. So this is a pre-commit check of data. So they have a job of actually blocking and restricting the commitment of data. That's why they're called validation rules. It's executed on the server side. They can access and have knowledge of the data that is being submitted from the form, and they can have any access to any of the data inside the database as well. So the scripting objects there are there. So its purpose is to block any data that is without tolerance, so it's outside of what we want to allow inside the system. Now, the last type of script that are relevant for us when we're dealing with the mobile theme are the table level scripts, and these are triggered when a record is committed, and they're executed again on the server. So like validation rules, they can access any of the data that's submitted, but unlike validation rules, they can't block the save. So table level scripts aren't the thing to block data going in, but they are potentially the thing to cascade a change throughout the system. So based on what a user enters into their mobile device, you could use a table level script to be able to send that out and ripple a change across multiple tables, it creating other tasks or activities as you want. So they can cascade changes throughout Sage CRM. Now, we are going to be just thinking about the server side today. So that's create, validate, and the table level scripts. Now, there are limitations to each of the scripting environments. And there is this idea of something called the scope of reference and the scope of effect. So what can you access to be able to work out, should I be executing, should I be firing? That's the scope of reference. And then what can I do and what can I affect is the scope of effect. So we can make the change with that. So there are different objects in the context that you're executing, and there is different environmental information that you might need to be able to determine. So this is the scope of reference, and then the effect is what you can actually do. Now, we're going to see here that we can look at these rule types and understand where they are referencing, what they are referencing and what they're controlling. So here you can see that I've logged on to a device using the mobile theme. And you can see that if I start to create a reference, you can see that some of the fields are marked red and there's an asterisk to indicate that there's a required field. Now, we saw in previous lessons that in the very first lesson that we can control whether a field is mandatory or not, or required or not, through field level security. It's just a click. And if, though, I scroll down through the page here, you can see that I've actually got another field here called close by. Now, close by is actually a field in the opportunity table, because this is what we're looking at, entering a new opportunity. And that field is called Oppo Target Close. And this is also a required field. Now, this field is interesting as this screen is different from the main desktop screen. And if we go into the admin screens, we can actually see this. We can see that the two screens are different in definition. Both the mobile and the desktop use the screen definition opportunity detail box. But if you notice, the desktop version has fewer fields and it completely misses out our field, which we're talking about, which is the Oppo Target Close. But the mobile version of the screen, and this is the one on the right, has that. Now you can see that it's highlighted in the blue. Now, the desktop interface uses workflow, and the opportunity workflow adds an additional, if you think about the opportunity summary screen in the main desktop environment, you'll have your opportunity detail box as well as a web picker on top, and underneath you'll have an opportunity progress box which contains the fields that are typically updated through the action of the workflow. An opportunity target close, or the close by date, is set there, and it is therefore also set in the context of workflow and is controlled by workflow. The mobile theme has to ensure that any data that is entered through the mobile device arrives in the same state and quality as that governed by the workflow. So we can actually have to think that our Oppo Target Close field in the definition on the right-hand side, has a create script that dynamically changes this field to be required as the screen is loaded into the mobile device. You can see there, it's got this tiny little bit of code which simply says required equals true. So our mobile device will experience that field in the screen as being controlled. And so if I go back to the mobile interface, I can populate the fields that I want, try and save. But here you can see that this I've changed because it's the mobile device using the mobile version of the opportunity detail box, this field adheres to the policy and that required is true. And so validation has happened as the data is submitted. Okay. So that explains that here we're able to use the create scripts for additional validation, and you're going to be working with different behaviors. And it's clear that the error message refers to the Oppo target field set to be required on the onCreate script. Okay. Now I'm going to log on as another user so I can demonstrate the idea of validation, and we can start to add in a new meeting for this user. And what you'll see is that I've made an error in my date, and my start date is ahead of my end date, and so it's going to be picked up by code. So as I work in it, you'll see that there's validation behavior quite happily within the context of the mobile device. And this is going to be telling us a couple of things in here. So let's say I've saved the data and I want to go and have a look and see what's happening here. This is a function inside the system. Now, this is inside the com date time field of the CRM mobile version of the communication scheduling box. So this is one of the standard fields used within the mobile interface. Now, I don't really want to look too much at this code because I don't like, doing this type of looking too much at code for the sake of looking at code. But this script ensures that the end date is after the start date, and it handles the potential errors. What's important is that it is showing you that you're able to read using something called values, which is one of the standard internal script behaviors. You're able to read the information submitted from the mobile device, and it's coming in from any of the fields that are within that mobile device as well. So I'm able, within one field, to be able to check my scope of references, such I can check any of the data coming in to be able to perform comparisons or calculations. Now, I spoke at the beginning of the lesson, I talked about how scripts have this concept of scope of reference, what can I check, and what's my scope of impact, scope of reference, scope of effect. I want to develop this idea a little bit more. I want to think about how we use this in the context of table level scripts. So in the last lesson, so in yesterday's lesson, we saw that as I committed a new custom entity, I had added a little message saying, hello world. I wanted to show that we had this potential behavior that could trigger a larger system-wide behavior triggered as the new custom entity was entered into the system. This bit of behavior is as a result of a post-insert event function firing. That's what I used in this particular case. So as the record was entered, the post-insert fired. Table level scripts have specific event functions that are triggered when certain actions occur on a table. So we've got the insert record, which is inserted as you would expect. It is fired as you would expect on the insert of the record. It happens when it fires is you don't have details of what's returned, so you don't have the commit result. The post insert is executed immediately after the successful commitment of the record, and it can then be used to fire knowing that you've got that record in the database, and you can also obtain that record's where clause, primary key. So you could then do other work to automatically attach other things to it. There's the update record, and there's also the delete record. They fire when you would expect them to fire, which is after the successful update or after the successful delete. And they allow us to automate and customize the behavior of the system in response to the changes of data taking place at this table level within Sage CRM. Now, reminding you that this is the fundamental nature of the table level script. It is firing when the data changes in the database. It raises a potential problem for us. We saw in the discussion of the create script that we may have to take action within the mobile version of a screen to ensure that the behavior of the mobile device is consistent with the behavior of the main desktop. So table level scripts fire at the level of the record. So this is after all of the interface, it's down in the server. So table level scripts are executed within the server, and it raises the problem of, is there a way of distinguishing between a record being updated via the mobile device or the record being updated in the main interface? Because you may need to know that in order to ensure that the mobile script does certain actions compared with the main desktop, because they are trying to keep things with the same behavior. So this is a slide from our first lesson. You remember the differences we saw within the URL for the two equivalent screens. Now, this is both the opportunity list screen. You have the desktop on the left, very obviously with the pipeline being shown, and then you have the mobile equivalent on the right. So these are equivalent versions. So the opportunity list metadata definition retrieves the data and provides the definition of what's going to be returned to the screen and how it should be displayed. And the mobile screen's URL, though, is different. And that difference can be examined. You can suddenly realize that if we can get hold of the URL, then we know which one has come in through the mobile and which one has come in through the desktop. Now you can see here on this screen that I have read and displayed the current URL, or a version of the current URL. Now I've done that through a little trick. I've used the method crm.url, and I've passed to it an action code. And if what I've just said seems a little strange to you and you don't know what I mean by crm.url, if you have a look at the documentation, what you want to have a look at are inside the developer's guide on the up on the help center. You want to have a look there and have a look at the ASP reference guide, and it will talk about the objects that are available to us. There's also stacks of articles on the community hub, which will talk you through how this behavior works, the crm.url. You can look for that and you can work out how you can grab that. So I can use this in the context of here, the particular action code I've used, which is 115, is irrelevant. I'm not actually going to be building a working hyperlink. What I want to do is to get a URL that tells me the stuff that I'm interested in. And here you can see that it does just that. I can parse this string to look for the XML and make sure if it contains the XML, then I'm sure that I'm in a context that has come about because the data has come from a mobile device or a device using the mobile theme. So in which case I can make a script that only fires when it is a mobile device submitting the data. So I can put a guard on any of my behavior. Now this is less needed for create and validate scripts because, as we've seen, the version of the screen for a mobile device can be very different from the version of the screen used within the desktop. But for table level scripts, this is something that is very important to know about, so we can use it to ensure that exactly the right behavior is called when we need it. This screen, my next screen that I've put up here, looks very busy. Actually, it's containing a lot of rich information. It's showing me just about everything I could possibly want to know about the current user within this session. And if I look at how I've changed my script, and you can see I've changed this to be an update record script now, but you can see that what I'm doing is I'm iterating through all of the properties of the current user object. So I'm able to read and access everything from preferences on the number of rows that a user likes to see, their date time preferences, things like that. So I've got a lot of information about my current user. And if I change it again, I can actually see here all of the fields that are being sent from the mobile device down to the server. Now, what I've done is I'm using a trick, and this particular trick relies on the fact that objects like the screen or the block are innumerable. So what I've created by going in and grabbing hold of the screen project new entry, I am now enumerating it. So I can step through each of those fields, reading their names and then reading those out into the interface. So I can reference everything. This allows me to be absolutely certain I'm on this device. You know, that's the XML. I'm on my mobile device, and I can now step through all of the fields, fetching the data that has been submitted because I know what screen will be being used. And I can be sure of what fields that I'm expected to have within the data before I do a particular task. So that's an idea that we've got here, and I can also check the state of the data already in the system. Now you can see here that I have a variable that is returning for the where clause. And this, if we look at this little script is very interesting, as it's applicable when it's post insert and on the update. The where clause will return to you the context that is necessary to return the data that is on the screen. The where clause literally that is used to grab that data. So if we're looking at a project entity, I can use the where clause variable that CRM knows about because we're on a particular screen. I can take that where clause and use it to allow me to fetch record that's in the database already. Now, what's interesting is that I can use in the case of a table level script, I can use the context information, which is obtained before a commit, and I can look at the values information that is obtained after submission, and I can check to see if there's a difference between the data that is submitted and the data that's in the database. And I could do that comparison, and I could then pick off some other behavior. Again, there are examples and discussions of this more advanced information available to you on the community and also within the lessons inside the YouTube channel. So we're on the last stretch, really. We're going to think about what we do with escalations and notifications. And the good news here is that it's a little bit more straightforward, because we are just using Sage CRM, making changes and then experiencing those inside the mobile device. If I'm outside the organization, my experience of things are going to be very similar. The exception is that I don't have an escalation tab or a feed to tell me what my notifications are. I would be relying on the information that has come to me through text messages and through the email. But it's the same sort of thing that we can, because escalation rules are time-based checks against the state of data, they can be used to be triggered and can be triggered by data that is changed as a result of a mobile user, and then cause other work to be assigned to them, or to have the creation of an appointment or a task or an escalation or another workflow action taking place. Our escalation behavior is all time driven, and what we can't have is on-screen alerts except by the emails and the text messages that we may send out. But we can see that a escalation rule is just as able to pick up the data changes that are made by a mobile user and cause those to trigger anything else that we may want. But what we have to understand is that our experience of the alerts and behavior is very much on the sense we're using the full realization of reality of what this mobile device is. It's because I'm assuming that I would be working with my email system. Perhaps that's Exchange. It could be a Google system, but let's assume I'm using Outlook within the context of Exchange, and I would have Exchange integration, information flowing in there, and I would also be seeing my emails, and I'd also be seeing the text messages that arrive for me. Here, we might have an escalation rule informing a user who's assigned a new case or a new opportunity. In this particular case, it's an opportunity of a high value opportunity that is over a particular amount because it's exceptional. Well, in which case, yes, that will come through. That will come through nicely with the idea of text message. You can be working in this and you can see the alert happen for you there and then. We've now covered in this just about 40 minutes a lot of information about the way in which we use the server features in conjunction with the mobile theme. We're going to keep developing this because I've started to hold up and talk about the phone itself. So we're going to be looking at our next lesson around the integration with device features and actually making calls, etc. The basic behavior there. And we'll be looking as well at, in the final lesson, about the optimized reports for mobile users. But let's see if anyone has got any questions for today. Thank you so much, everyone. I am very grateful that you're all here, and I will see you next week. So thank you all, and goodbye.